Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Deb Berman and I am a principal at an organization called Scaled. Welcome. I'm here with our panelists, Brian, Sharon, and Tom. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and give a little background on their organizations. Just a quick reminder before we do that, this webinar is being recorded, so if you're not comfortable with any of your questions being asked publicly, just know that that's happening, and it'll be available on the Sales Hacker site within about 48 hours. So everybody's in listen-only mode, just so that we don't hear your boss come into your office and ask you a question, so it doesn't disturb everybody. But you can ask questions right in the question panel of the GoToWebinar control panel. And we encourage questions all along. We want to make sure this is really useful to everyone today. We're talking about how to achieve high growth sales with sales enablement, and we've got some really expert panelists here to kind of guide our way and guide our learning. And at Scaled, we actually work with organizations on kind of the intersection of process and technology. So this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I talk about this stuff all day long, and I've got a lot of questions for the panelists that I hear from organizations, which hopefully will be helpful to everyone as well. So I'm going to ask everyone to go around. Brian, I'd like just to have you start, just introduce yourself, and then Sharon, and then Tom, and then I'll kick us off with some questions.
Yeah, so thanks for the Sales Hacker crew for having us. My name's Brian Fravel. I am Vice President of Marketing. I run marketing and the sales development team at Velo. We're a sales enablement platform. I have more years than I'd like to express here on product marketing, sales enablement, sales support type roles. So really excited to be here with both Sharon and Tom.
Okay, Sharon. Thanks, Brian.
So my name is Sharon Little. I am a practicing sales enablement leader. I work currently at a fast-growth startup called Rubrik in Silicon Valley. Previously, spent most of my time at enterprise software companies, including VMware. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book about sales enablement. So I'm very excited to be here with the group today.
Great, thanks. Go ahead, Tom.
Wow, so I am not a sales enablement expert. I'm actually a user of sales enablement. So I'm a CRO at LifeSize. It's a small startup up in Austin, so it's a over $100 million startup doing really well. I joined there a little while ago, so I have all the sales enablement needs. My history in software, I was at Autodesk for an awful long time, so I left there as a VP of worldwide sales for manufacturing, and about $1 billion in sales there. Had about 800 people reporting into, so sales enablement was a huge concern to me. So in big companies and in small, it's always important to get good enablement going.
Terrific, great. So if there's one thing that I know about what sales leaders want, it's that they want an unfair advantage, right? We have tremendous pressure, right? We've got our CEO who has pressure from the board. We've got a very large team, or even a small and growing team, but there's a lot of pressure, and we want an unfair advantage. So what I want to start off with is there's still room for early adopters to have a strong advantage with sales enablement as kind of their focal point. And Sharon, I wanted to ask you to start by kind of walking us through what it means at a baseline level to have really strong sales enablement to get specifically an unfair advantage.
Sure, and I think this is an advantage that is available for the short term. You know, so many companies have seen the advantage of having a sales enablement function and have kind of stepped up to it. So there might be another couple of years of runway there, but I think before long, this will be a given. Just like having a strong sales operations function is so important to a company, you know, sales enablement is equally as important. From a foundational standpoint, you know, there are a couple of things that I think make a big difference. I think certainly an investment in onboarding. You have to make sure that as you're growing your organization that you have a strong onboarding function in place to bring those folks into the company and to get them productive. Some other things that might not be quite so obvious. I think field communications is a critical part of enablement and having that infrastructure in place. I'm also a big believer in having the technology, a technology like Velo, to make sure that you can, you know, enable your folks and do it in a very cost-effective sustainable kind of way. So those elements absolutely critical. One other thing I'd add in there is just defining competencies for the key roles within your sales organization. You can't train people sort of randomly. You need to know what they need to be competent on in order to put the right kind of programs in place.
Great. So onboarding, field communications, technology, and competencies. I want to hop to technology of those four first. And Brian, I think this is a little bit, something that's probably in your wheelhouse. Can you talk about technology to kind of attach on to what Sharon was saying? How has technology influenced sales enablement, or how has it and how does it? And what does that mean for sales leaders?
Yeah, I think it's been a big enabler of it, to be honest with you. And, I'm sure a lot of us on this call have read about how the buyer's journey has changed, right? Technology, depending on whose statistics you look at, 50 to 75% of the research is done before they pick up the phone and call a salesperson. And so for a salesperson, and I'd love to hear Tom's opinion on this too, is the conversation could be very different. Maybe someone's in the discovery stage, and the questions you ask as a salesperson in the discovery stage is very different than, let's say someone's done a ton of research and go, okay, I've narrowed it down to you and two competitors. Tell me how you're differentiated. And so as a sales enablement professional, how do I give them the coaching, the content, and the knowledge to answer those two very different questions? And so technology plays a critical role in sales enablement today.
Yeah, I think, and just, Brian, I want to kind of have you hone in on that a little bit, but for those who have joined late, I just wanted to welcome you and also let you know everyone's in listen-only mode, but you can chat questions right into the question box in the control panel. And we'll be taking questions throughout the whole webinar. You don't need to wait until the end. But with that, Brian, I'd like you to kind of say a little bit more, I'm sorry, Tom, I'd like you to say a little bit more about what Brian was saying. And, sales enablement is it's no longer sufficient really to say, product marketing or some heroic knight in shining armor with an amazing PowerPoint. It's just not the answer anymore, right? I think that's what people used to expect. And more comprehensive sales enablement is, especially, technology driven. So can you just talk about kind of the rise of sales enablement and specifically how you're seeing technology be utilized in the last or how it's evolved in the last 5 to 10 years and how you're seeing it used today in your organization?
So hopefully I will get my answer out a little more compressed in the question, because that was a long question, right? And I was just listening to that. Going, wow, if I was the sales guy in that one, what do I say? So I think, Brian was talking about the buying cycle changing, and this, and when you talk to salespeople, there's a buying cycle and there's a sales cycle, and they kind of ride right next to each other. And when a sales guy is untrained and he's out there, he's like, wow, my sales cycle is so quick. He just got to the buying cycle late, right? So the buying cycle is compressed a little bit, but that salesperson is still, it's not, he might not be trained up, you're not ask the right questions in the discovery mode. He might not ask the right questions. He might not be prepared. And to your point, where is a PowerPoint enough? It's not enough, right? It's the heroic efforts of product management in the past is not going to make it. You need stuff that's I like to say this, Brian, when we were talking earlier, is that the sales enablement is no longer onboarding, and that's what people used to treat it. Here's your package, on board, learn everything you can. It's just-in-time information from when you need it, where you are in the buying cycle, and really get that person prepared to answer the question properly for the customer to move them along to a buyer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Deb, I think it's real time, right? Technology has made everything real time, and every sales conversation is different. So how do I get the right message to the sales rep with the right content for the specific conversation?
But done correctly, Brian, sales enablement and sales operations used to be an afterthought. One of the questions I heard earlier was, when do you do sales enablement? As soon as possible, right? Because as you bring salespeople on, having them onboarded correctly, having them get the just-in-time information properly, just if you have one salesperson, it's important, right? Because if you look at a close rate, if you look like, everybody talks about pipeline, everybody talks about how much pipeline you're going to get to create revenue. If you take a close rate for a sales guy that's trained, he's going to get a higher close rate. 20% is a good one to go for. That's 5 opportunities for every 1 opportunity you close. You get an untrained sales rep that's not enabled and is not working properly, and he's got a 5% close rate. That means you burned 20 opportunities to get a 1 close. And that just puts enormous pressure on the rest of the company. So when you think about it, you're really putting those opportunities just into a bad sales machine, and you really have to tune that machine to make sure that you're not wasting pipeline and not giving great pipeline to bad sales and bad sales enablement. So you really have to think about how you launch that program, when you launch that program, and how you keep it refreshed and ongoing.
So one of the questions that's already popped up, and I think I'm really glad this was asked, because I think a lot of people don't understand sales enablement at a tactical level. There's not a deep bench of kind of resources to really kind of fill this gap. And one of the questions that's been asked so far is, what do we mean by sales enablement? Do we also mean business development, team? Some call it sales support. So I'm not sure who wants to take this, but how would you guys answer that question in terms of like drilling a little bit further into what it is and perhaps also what it's not? And Sharon, maybe you want to take it
I'd
further.
like Sharon to start that one.
Take a shot at that one, because I probably answered that question hundreds of times. And it's interesting. So the question comes less frequently now, and I think that that's a good thing. We're seeing that people are starting to understand what that means, and there are a couple of contexts that I usually talk about it in. At a high level, you look at it as very person-based, right? So when you think about some of the investments that companies had made around CRM and those kind of things, those are more around systems and process, and all of those things are very important. But at the end of the day, it is an individual salesperson who's out there in front of your prospects and customers, and you want to make sure that they're invested in properly. And there certainly is an art to selling. We all understand that. Yeah. And so it is those conversations and that ability to engage in a way that's going to have an impact. What I oftentimes will talk to sales enablement leaders about are kind of 5 areas of discipline. One is certainly training. Content is a big part of this. Sales tools, communication, and culture. I think that sales enablement also has responsibility for making sure the culture is strong within an organization. And there are a lot of ways that that manifests itself, but those are kind of the 5 broad categories around sales enablement.
Go ahead, Brian.
Throw on that. From my career perspective, it was very operational in the beginning, and I think Sharon hit on it. Training and content portal tended to be the default, and it was kind of like, okay, I'm done. But I think that culture point that you just brought up at the end is a big one, and I don't think training can be a one and done thing too. I mean, you onboard someone, but onboarding is ongoing, right? Your competition is changing, your marketplace is changing, you're launching products. What am I doing to enable people on an ongoing basis?
So I think these 5 categories are really helpful, and I think, Sharon, you've probably gotten this question before, but there's another one, and I get this question all the time. Can you juxtapose sales enablement versus sales ops?
Sure. So here's one of the best ways that I've done it. I found that for a lot of people, the light kind of goes off when I have this conversation. So you think about how sales operations works, and most people are familiar with it because it's a business discipline that's probably 20 years old, let's say. It works in many companies as an intersection point between finance and the field organization. It's a hub organization. Sales enablement is the same thing, hub organization, but it's between marketing and sales. And you need to have those hub organizations in place when you're working with a sales organization that's so outward focused and has to deliver a number quarter after quarter and month after month. And so think of sales enablement, similar to sales operations, but it's a hub between marketing and sales as opposed to a hub between finance and sales. And then you've got to have some really different skill sets. So the folks that you would bring into a sales operations team, they're going to be Excel jockeys and analytics, and they're going to have deep backgrounds in Salesforce or other CRM tools. They know comp, pricing. Sales enablement, you need folks who are charming and cross-functional, who understand sales as a core discipline. Most of the folks in my team have a sales background, including myself, and they know what it's like to carry a quota. It's a different person in very many ways.
Got it. So, Tom, if you could speak, there's a question about high growth, hyper growth, high growth companies, and you mentioned that it's important to have sales enablement right from the very beginning, but there's a question here about how to make the case for it when the organization is still small. And I think you probably have had to do this, or I suspect you have.
I make the case all the time. So when you look at, when you take the sales ops part of it, which is, great, Sharon's a great example, right? In between marketing to sales enablement, in between finance and the guys that are doing quotas, they're all McKinsey graduates, right? For sales ops, right? That sales enablement piece, you sit there and you look at the sales ops people and say, okay, what is the sales capacity of the sales force? What is the ASP that you're selling at, right? How many phone calls can you make in a day? How many opportunities do you have to have it? What close rate do you have? So you sit there and say, this is the pipeline I need, and this is the sales capacity to hit that financial plan. And when you have that financial plan and say, okay, how do I do that? Then you look at sales enablement and you say, sales enablement is going to take 100% sales capacity and make it 150, right? So they'll take all the salespeople you have and just make them all that much better, right? So if you have 5 salespeople, they're going to be acting like 7.5 salespeople. So your sales capacity just goes up because you're training them, you're giving them the content that they need in the time that they need it, right? So if they're spending all their time asking their friend, hey, how'd you sell that last one you just did? What was the talk track that you used? How'd you go up against that particular competition? That competition just launched a whole new thing in a press release. What's the talk track to that? If you're not on top of that constantly, right, you will fall behind and your sales capacity goes down. So when you're out there and you're making the pitch for more people, or when do you hire sales enablement, just go, here's my sales capacity without it, here's my sales capacity with it. It's just a numbers game. I'll get $450,000 more a quarter per guy if I do it this way than if I do it that way. And then it's like, why wouldn't you do it earlier, right? Why wouldn't you bring the guy on earlier because of the gal and help you make everybody that much better? Because you wouldn't start a sales team without pipeline. So when you would ask me the same question, like, when would you start making pipeline for the salespeople? As soon as possible, right? So if you got a lag of 90-day close rate, you got to make pipeline in November to close in February and January, right? If you're not enabling these people to talk about competition and placement and get away from features and functions and get into real discussions about what's the ROI, you have to get into the conversation about with the customers, like, why wouldn't you spend the money to buy this, right? And if you're not having those really intelligent conversations, then that's where your sales capacity goes down, and it's just similar to pipeline.
I think that's a great answer, and you're touching on another question that has been asked, and also that Sharon had mentioned, which was, Sharon, you mentioned training first. I'm curious how, and either anyone can answer this question, but how often do you conduct formal sales trainings, and what kind of format do you typically do that in?
Oh boy, so this is a bigger question than it probably seems on its surface. I think you almost have to look at it in 2 buckets. So there is the onboarding component, which is a substantial undertaking. When I look at what we do now at Rubric, and we probably bring a new sales team through every 6 weeks, which is a substantial deliverable for any organization. But it is broken down into, pre-work, then there is a boot camp component, and then there is a post-boot camp component. We also have sort of 5 core disciplines that we look to drive competency on for our new hires, because we know that that's what makes the difference in someone being successful or not. And then we measure each cohort to see how they're ramping. So this is, you've got to put some metrics around it, and I think that's another interesting topic that we could, kind of delve into. But then, like, you're right, you've got that onboarding component that's happening, but then you have to take those folks that have onboarded previously, because as a company, you're always releasing a new product, and how do you keep them trained and up to speed and knowledgeable? And that's a whole other effort. I do think technologies like Velo are very important to us. The LMS components, the ability to consume content. We do a lot with virtual materials. We try to be very modern in our approach. And when I say modern in our approach, that means the training has to be engagement style training. This whole idea of you can have one smart person with a PowerPoint in front of a room and expect that your sales team is going to learn anything is ridiculous. You have to actually get them to wrap their mouths around the words and to practice and to get feedback from their peers. It's quite an involved structure to put solid enablement, solid ongoing enablement in place. But just like Tom said, it pays for itself over and over again.
And Tom, how do you conduct your trainings?
So I'm trying to steer away from the big, trade show type, training and all the rest of the stuff. I want the ongoing training. I want people, people are coming from all walks of life into sales, right? There's no college degree for sales, right? So you can't go, oh, I'm going to get everybody from Cornell because they just graduated with a great sales degree, right? I mean, there's philosophers. I'm a structural engineer by schooling, right? So who would have known I would have been a CRO someplace in sales? The thing I look for is just the ongoing piece constantly. So the minute someone puts a bunch of stuff in PowerPoint, I get nervous, right? Because then people have to go find it. And then there's a whole bunch of PowerPoints. Then you look at the enablement tools. You got some tool up in the web, right? And you say, okay, here's 25 pieces of content. And I told Brian, I says, like, when do I look at what piece of content, right? Do I look at this one first, this one second? Is there some kind of strategy in the way I should read it? If I read this one first, will it make me better if I read this one second? So, timing, just like everything else, is really important. So when you think about the content and training and onboarding, you want to onboard people, you want to get them into the culture. I heard Brian say this earlier, right? That culture that you want to have is very important. I think enablement helps you. This is how we want to talk to customers. This is how we want to talk about competition. So that cultural piece comes from that onboarding and the enablement, right? And then you got to reinforce it. We have a very large, I got 1,100 channel partners at my new company, and I've launched this new thing, and I have constantly 100 times already been talking about the same launch, about the same thing. And it's just like, I have got to get that under control quickly and make sure that people understand the positioning of something I just put out there, because it's like, oh, I get it now, right? And when you talk to them over and over, they get it. My problem is I can't call all 1,100 and have that conversation over and over and over again. So that little chunk of training is important, and it has to be based on that onboarding and enablement that you went through, and then the refreshers. But those chunks are the most important pieces to me.
So let's talk about metrics. Have come up a couple of times, and I think this is a difficult question. But so I'm curious. Two-part question. What's that?
No, it's not. If you don't measure it, if you don't measure it, it's no good.
So what are some of the key metrics that you should use to measure sales enablement success then, if it's not difficult?
Difficult question.
I looked at it right away. It's like the close rate for a salesperson, individual close rate, win rates, capacity, all those things, right? You can definitely see when someone's taking the enablement training, someone's on topic, they're doing well against competition. You can see the win rates against competition, and then you can see what document that he was using, what information he was gathering, and you can start to measure the flow of information to the person and the close rates and win rates and capacity and how well they're doing with what pipeline, right? So
Well, over what time period do you recommend that measurement be put into place?
Immediately. Right? So, I mean, in order for you to get the head count and go to the CFO and say, this is how I want to do this, right, you have got to be able to show them the math, right? And if you're not measuring it, then you're a sales guy that just waves his hands and goes, I'm going to do great with more people. Just give them, then you get the constant, I love the fact that, sales enablement sits between marketing and sales. You get that, I love marketing. Marketing's the biggest sales engine we have out there, right? And if you're not measuring everything, then you get that sales and marketing butting heads, and you don't want that, right? So you just want to make sure that you're using the pipeline correctly, you're winning correctly, you're doing all the stuff correctly, and you have to measure all that so you can go back and say, this is how we're winning, this is why we need more of this is why you need less of that. And if you can't measure it and show people, then it's a very tough conversation.
Brian, what would you add to that?
Yeah, so glad to be back, by the way. I'm just passing technology, but a little technology blitz there. Sorry, everyone. And I'd love to hear Sharon's perspective as the glue between myself and Tom. As a marketing person, I totally agree with him. There is no better situation to be in as a marketing person than to go to the CFO and say, look what my program drove for sales. And it starts at the macro level at sales and marketing alignment, because I have been in so many organizations where marketing says, look what I drove, and the head of sales goes, no. I don't care.
Exactly.
If you don't start with the alignment, forget it. You have two people butting heads, and they're both fighting for the same dollars from CFO. You need to go with a unified voice.
Totally.
All right, so let me jump in because I can't help myself. So I think this is a very difficult topic. I think it's a very difficult topic for practicing sales enablement folks. And while everything that's said is very accurate, the difficulty for a lot of folks, especially if you have a lengthier sales cycle, is that close rate, time to first deal, all of these things have too long of a time frame. You need to know much sooner whether a rep is ramping or not. And so we'll talk about leading indicators and lagging indicators. Everything tied to forecast is a lagging indicator. Everything tied to pipeline is a leading indicator. And you can absolutely tether everything that you're doing within a sales enablement function to leading indicators. So you want to see for a new hire, you want to see how they're building pipeline. Are they converting pipeline? Are they accelerating pipeline? All of those things will tell you whether they're on the right track or not. And if you have particular sales plays within your organization, you can actually map your training, tools, and content to each stage within that sales play, and you can start to get a sense of, as opportunities get stuck at a certain stage, maybe we're not training properly there, or maybe we don't have the right sales tools. And so you can make it all very metrics driven, but it does help to have sales enablement in early and to come in with an understanding of how to put this in place early. It's much harder for companies to go back and retrofit these kind of enablement metrics into their business than it is to have those in place from the beginning.
So I think that's great. Taking a look at, for example, opportunity stage duration could be a great way to track this. But what about if someone, I'm just hearing a little echo, I don't know if you can hear it or not. What about if there's a person that has a little bit of things done in sales enablement, but not necessarily a ton, like maybe they have a portal with some content. What are the ways of building that out so that all the leading and the lagging and then be caught up?
So I can offer a suggestion, and I think this is based on something that Brian had said earlier. If you have a defined sales process or you have a defined buyer's journey, that's kind of the beginning for all of this. So with that defined, you can start to map your tools and your training and your content. Without it defined, you're randomly offering sales enablement, and you need to make that a priority before you do anything else.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I would say the other thing I've seen is companies have an onboarding program that is finite. It ends at a week, a month, or whatever it may be.
Brian, let me just interrupt you for a second. Karen and Tom, can you mute while Brian's talking, and I'll do the same, and that might address the echo.
All right. Oh, that sounds much better. All right. Let me back up. A lot of companies define onboarding as a finite period of time, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe they're sophisticated, it's 3 months, whatever it may be, and then they stop there. And I think you have to view it as an ongoing process. And let's be honest, not every salesperson you hire is going to be successful. And the faster you can determine whether they're going to be successful or not, the better you are. And so the metrics you define along the ways and what you measure and monitor will determine your long-term success.
Great. Sharon or Tom, would you add anything to that before we go on to the next question?
So for me, it's like, measuring salespeople and watching that, hire quickly, fire quickly is what Brian was just basically saying. To measure it correctly, you want to make sure you get the right people in the right seats quickly. Train them up quickly, get them enabled, empower them to do really well, because they're out there and the reason why you hired them is because you think they're going to do really well. So make sure you support that person as quickly as possible. To Sharon's point, the leading indicators and the lagging indicators, totally understand all that. How are they moving through the sales cycle? How are they moving through the buying cycle? What tools are they utilizing? We had one of the companies I was at, it was like, we have a 47% chance of winning better, more deals if people did video calls than if they did audio calls with a customer. And we show that to all the sales guys, and we assumed that all the sales guys would then do video calls. Then we found out quickly that all the sales guys didn't feel comfortable on video, right? And so then you started to say, okay, what's going on? Why are you not comfortable? And then you see the guy with his baseball cap turned backwards and the ruddy T-shirt because he was an inside sales guy. It's like, okay, guys, the world's changing and we have to change with it, right? But if we have a 47% chance of, being more successful, we need to take that. And then you start to see, as you give these indicators to people and you give them the math and you show them, right, both, internally and externally, it just really, truly helps you. So, the more you can measure, the more often you can measure, the quicker you can measure, to Brian's point, the more that you can manage, right? And I think that's important. I mean, the frontline sales manager is probably one of the hardest jobs out there. Usually a sales guy that was promoted, and, sales enablement truly helps that person manage for the first time, right? If they're trying not to be, the best sales coach, the best sales guy, and they're always, coming in with a big red S on their chest trying to save everything, right? And they really start to manage. You watch the ones that take the sales enablement, and they just do a really good job of it.
So I'm glad you mentioned that example of, rolling out like a video solution and realizing people aren't using it. Can you talk about other mistakes that you've either made or that you've seen other people make within sales enablement, and perhaps we can prevent them from being executed by some of the people on the phone today?
Wow, I mean, there's so many. I mean, I make mistakes daily, right? Yeah, so for sales enablement, for us, the one thing I always tell people is, like, hiring is a #1 priority for every manager, and they always treat it as their second priority, right? Everybody's been talking about the revenue you have to generate and the number that you have and the quota you got to carry. If you hire and hire quickly, then your ramp is not as, steep, right? So if you hire, you watch people and they have like 16 interviews, 17 interviews, they put everybody through the ringer, they got to make sure they got to really hire well. If you hire that person, I had one company where it was 120 days to hire, right? That was on average to hire, and I measure everything. And I just said, if I can move that to 30 days, I cut 90 days out, that's a whole quarter. That's a whole quarter that I have to train that person and get them up to speed and ramp faster. So the #1 thing for me was to hire as quickly as possible, and then I measured those people that I hired fast versus those people that I hired slow, and to see, is there a better take rate, right? So one of my biggest mistakes was not hiring as fast as possible, and just doing too much to make sure that everything was perfect. Don't let great get in the way of good. Because, get out there, get good, and then make that happen, right? So I think that was one of the big things that I learned, was just to move that hiring bar and make it really important for all those frontline managers to make that, to give the time that they needed to hiring and bring them on, and then onboarding those people as they manage them.
Great. Brian or Sharon, any mistakes that you've made that you are not embarrassed to share?
No, I'll give you a mistake, and not at the current company. In fact, part of the reason I joined Velo is like, oh my gosh, you've solved these problems that we've done. But, and you can look at my LinkedIn profile to see where we made these mistakes, but we're just going to consolidate all the content. All we need to do is get all the sales content in one place, and then it'll be easy to find, and we'll have this fabulous search, and everybody will sell like a pro. Well, the content, even if you do that, by the way, it's almost impossible to do that. Even if you do that, the content doesn't sell, the people do. And so I think the biggest mistake that in the past is we lost sight of the people. And what are we doing to help the people be great sellers? That's great, you have good content, but if they don't know what to do with it or what to say, it doesn't matter.
Great. Sharon, anything to add there?
Yeah, so a couple of things to add, and this is more directly related to just the practice of sales enablement. Random training not tethered to competencies will get you in trouble every single time, no matter what. Gosh, what else with regard? I think hiring old-time trainers is another problem I see in companies. So if you look back to even...
What's an old-time trainer, Sharon?
Yeah, so I'm going to explain it if you give me just a second. So if you look back to, say, maybe even 10 or 15 years ago, before enablement was a word that people were commonly referring to, you did have training within sales organizations, but there was a very different point of view around how to train a sales team. And you need to find folks who understand the connection between, bookings and enablement. You need to understand that enablement is more than training. You need to be very careful about hiring and staffing your enablement team if you're looking to drive results.
Great. So a couple of other questions from the audience here. Does anyone on the panel have any experience managing the cultural differences when it comes to sales in the U.S. versus sales in Asia?
Yes.
Any kind of regional talk with sales enablement, regional talk vis-a-vis sales enablement would be helpful.
So I manage worldwide teams. I've been managing worldwide teams for a long time. There's cultural differences everywhere. I mean, there's cultural differences between New England and the Deep South, right? I had a guy that kept telling me that dog won't hunt. I had to look it up. I was like, what is he saying? Right? Right? So it doesn't matter if you're international, non-international. There's always nuances into what you're selling and how you're selling it. But again, I always go back to the same thing I tell the people that were running. You know, I moved this guy that was in Spain. I moved him over to run Japan. He did a fabulous job, and people were worried that he was not going to be. But he was a marketer, and he ran all of EMEA for me. And then I moved him over to Japan, and we did about $300 million there, and he grew the heck out of it. But he's culturally sensitive, right? But it just doesn't. You don't have to be all that aware. It's business. When you're out there doing business, if you have that business culture and the business mindset, right, then you're going to do well over there, right? You just still have to be culturally sensitive to all the things and the way you say stuff and all the rest, but don't lose sight of the fact that business is business worldwide. And, you know, as the world gets flatter and flatter, you know, we're doing a deal with one customer, they're in Japan, but they're also doing, you know, most of the work with us in Belgium, right? Now, who knew that we were going to link those two together? So it happens all the time. So be culturally sensitive, but understand that business is business worldwide.
Great.
I think you do need to make sure your content producers, your sales enablement producers are not living in an ivory tower. If you're a U.S.-based company, you can't live there. So having most of my career internationally, I can tell you, I have experience going into the Apple and Dell, two of the toughest customers I've ever talked to, 1 to 2 slides. In Japan, it wasn't unusual to spend 4 hours on the same topic. It's different. And so if you have a sales enablement team that's U.S.-based, you're a U.S.-based company and you're dealing internationally, you need to listen really hard to your international counterparts because things are just different.
Right.
And you need to be able to customize.
And localize. Not just translate, but localize.
You know what, and Tom's point, New England is different than the South. I totally agree. It is. There's a lot of customization that needs to go on, and you need to listen to your salespeople who have the feet on the street and are talking to the customer every day.
Great. Another question. What would you suggest on specific approaches to enable younger sales reps versus seasoned sales reps and vice versa? Are there tools for the less seasoned reps that might be different for the more experienced, or no?
You know, I think this is a tough one. I think it's a tough one. For most companies, solving for different age groups is going to be quite a luxury. You know, just getting the work done to do core enablement is a substantial investment. Trying to solve for different age groups, I have yet to meet a company, and I have talked to very large companies, very well-funded companies. I've yet to talk to anyone who has the luxury to try to solve for multiple different age groups within their sales team. Most of your great sellers will flex to receive great enablement. So I would stay focused there on delivering something that works and moves the needle, and possibly worry less about different age groups.
Right. I wouldn't even mention age because you just get in all kinds of legal trouble, right? So seasoned versus non-seasoned, right? The thing for me is coachability, right? The number one reason that I hire people and keep people is, are they coachable, right? And you can be seasoned and be coachable, and you can be, you know, brand new into the market and coachable. If you're seasoned and uncoachable and you can't change the way we're, you know, because sales is dynamic and it's changing constantly. So even if you're in the same company for a long time, it's still going to be changing all the time. And if you're not open to that change and being coached to the new process they're using, the new, you know, all the new tools that are coming up, if you think about all the stuff that's come up in the last 10 years, right, it's an amazing amount of new stuff and the new way to contact people, you know, keep in contact with people, all the rest of the stuff that you need to just keep constantly updating yourself. So, yeah, coachability is the number one thing I look for. And once you have the coachability aspect, and no matter what group it is, seasoned or unseasoned, then you'll be able to put them through the enablement and the rest of the stuff. But it's a coachable thing. Great.
So we probably have time for 2 more questions, and for anyone who joined late, we're reading the questions off of the chat panel, the chat function, the question function in the control panel. So type them in. We won't be able to get to all of them, but we probably have time for about 2 more. There's one here. What tips does the panelists have for providing sales organizations with enablement after implementing a new sales process?
Who wants to handle that one? I've done it a bunch of times.
I'd love for the sales leader to go first. I have an opinion, but I'd love to hear your opinion, Tom.
I don't know. I want to hear yours now, please.
From my perspective, I made this point earlier. It's not one and done. It is constant reinforcement. They attend a 1-week boot camp. They're going to forget things. How are you reinforcing the key points? How are you doing it at the right time so they're receptive to it? And a lot of the concepts we talked about today help you do that.
It's got to be consumable, right? That's the whole. I talk about this all the time. Is like the content has to be consumable. There's only so much change that people can take before they're overloaded. I call it supersaturated. So look it up. Supersaturated is that's a sales guy's mind, and you look at that, and then all of a sudden you put one more piece of information in there, everything falls out, right? And you just have to make it consumable, right? And no matter what the change is, you can put it into bite-sized chunks and make it consumable, and then the change happens over time, right? It's not the one and done feature, but if you have a whole deck on stuff, there's 3 sound bites that you need for this part of the sale, and you need to be able to get a tool that allows you to actually give those 3 sound bites to that person at the right time, right? And that's important, right? If you just give them a 20-page deck about the way you're changing the way you're doing go-to-market, you're already way behind, right?
Definitely. So there's another one here. I'm not sure who wants to take this, but do you hire, I think it's a good one, do you hire in groups or classes and then onboard and train them as a group? And if so, what size works best? So if there's sort of cohorts being created, how do you bucket people together, generally speaking?
This is my life right now, so I'll go ahead and give a shot at this. I think when you're aggressively hiring a bunch of folks, it can be very sales leaders don't want to hire to a focal hire date, but that's really where I think folks need to go to. So if you can structure your onboarding around, these are the times we're going to be delivering boot camp, and based on that, these are the ideal hire dates. I am familiar with some companies that are sort of moving in that direction. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about an engagement-based style of onboarding where they're actually working with the material and presenting back to you, and there's a lot of engagement, if you get much larger than 30 or 40 people, it's really unwieldy. I'm actually a fan of smaller groups, keeping it to like 20 or 25. Once you get to something where you've got more than 40, you're talking about a large lecture-style classroom, and you won't have the same quality of learning as you do with a smaller group.
Great, that's helpful. And then what are your top 2 to 3 tech stack sales enablement tools that you would recommend? Brian, you want to take this one?
Obviously, I'd be biased and say you need a sales enablement tool like Velo, but I think it depends on the organization and where you're at. Sharon's in a unique situation. I know her situation, but the number of sales reps they're onboarding right now is crazy. So an onboarding tool and then an ongoing tool that helps them reinforce the training, surfaces up the content they need, etc., is super important if you're in the hyper-growth phase that she's in. I'll let the real practitioners answer that question, though, unbiased.
Fair enough. It's a good question, though.
So let me talk about functionality rather than specific vendors. I think that might be helpful for folks who are listening. Certainly integration into your CRM is important, and you've got to make sure that those connectors are in place because that's where you're going to get your data from. I would look into, dashboarding tools. I think that those are incredibly important. We're currently looking at ROI, TCO, calculator type of tools. That's an important thing for our business, and we need to streamline it. Anything that can streamline the core processes around your selling effort is very, very important. Things that save time for your sales folks. The ability to package demos, very, very important. And it really kind of is based on, I'll offer this kind of one last thing. Don't buy technology for technology's sake. Have your processes well defined, and then look at how you can leverage technology to support or streamline those processes.
Hey Deb, and as a bias vendor, I would say define your objectives and your pain points and the business problems you're trying to solve before you start looking for technology. I think Sharon's spot on that one.
I think that's a great way to sum that up. Tom, would you add anything to how you evaluate technologies or think about it in this context?
It's funny. So as I move from company to company, it's one of the first things I do. I ask for the pick list of all the technology we have, and you'd be amazed that there's probably 80 pieces of technology that just have creeped their way into the company and we're paying for. The first thing I look at is like, okay, what are we doing with it? How are we using it? To, Sharon's point is spot on, right? You look at all the functions and the process that you're trying to do, and what is this function going to help you or not? The accessibility is huge. Searchability, the ability to serve up the content at the right time. If you're just going to use some giant sharing site that has, 85 documents that someone's produced over the last 15 years, and you say good luck finding stuff, it's just not. It's not appropriate in today's world. It's just there's too many great tools out there that you should be able to have access to. The ROI calculator, the way you sell, when you produce it, when you put it out there, the helpful tips. I've looked at a couple of products that have some great tips for the first line sales manager. And here's, to Sharon's point on the dashboard, I look for that dashboard for the first line sales manager to say, here's the guy you're about to have the one-on-one with. Here's all the things that he's been doing this week. He's had this many audio calls, this many video calls. He's moved this many things through the pipeline. He's been stuck here, here, and here. And that dashboard for the first line manager is so helpful for the constant reinforcement of enablement, right? Hey, you really got to take a look at that tool. You got to use that, right? Did you not use it the last time? Okay, let's get on a call together. The call recording is something that's been really helpful for us, right? You listen to calls and you can say, hey, did you hear that? Or you talked 78% of the time and the customer talked this very small amount of time. Right? All these little tools are helpful, but again, it comes back to that sales enablement professional that has the overall arching, vision of how it should be with the overall process that makes all those things work together.
Yeah, I think we always talk about it in terms of, you can pay for your gym membership every month, but unless you're going to actually go, you're not going to see any value. I would love to just pay and make that problem go away, but you have to actually show up at the gym. So if you're going to buy technology, you have to make sure you have a plan in place to actually use it. So I think the idea of starting with the problem and how are you going to solve it, but then pulling through the implementation plan is the kind of upfront work that has to get done before any technology can have any value.
Great analogy.
Sorry, let me offer one other idea that might be helpful for listeners. So, particularly if you work at a software company, you'll understand this concept. So every time I've invested in a technology, it is very enabling for an enablement team to have technology in place, but you almost have to treat it like your own particular software release. So it's not you buy it and you launch it and they use it and you're done. You have to almost look at it as we're gonna set it up. We're gonna set it up to be successful. We're gonna launch it and we're gonna measure how people are using it. But then you need to continuously, almost on a quarterly basis, look at how you're going to enhance and improve that experience with that technology. Because what will happen really fast is your sales team will be blown away by that first release, and then they'll start to go, hey, but I really wanted to do this, or I really wanted to do this other thing. And if you're able to think of it as a regular, quarterly or bi-quarterly kind of release of enhancements to that technology so that you're continuing to add value, that's the best experience for your sales team.
Great. Okay, so in final parting words, is there anything that the group didn't ask? We didn't get to every single question, but anything that I didn't ask or that the group didn't ask that the panelists feel is kind of critically important to kind of part with in terms of sales enablement and how to achieve high growth sales by leveraging it?
I'll start. I don't think it's an option anymore. I think we talked about how the buyers are more sophisticated. Your sales reps need to be more armed. Plan, define a business problem, and tackle it in chunks. You can't tackle it all at once, and I'm sure Sharon will expand on this, but figure out what your biggest pain points are and start there.
And with your closing remarks, can you please provide your contact information so panelists can get in touch with you? So Brian, if you could add that, and then we'll go to Sharon and Tom.
Sure. You know, the best way to get in touch with us is just go to veloinc.com and contact us, and then actually I get the form, so you'll be contacting me directly. It's the easiest way.
Gosh, I was going to say something similar to Brian in that if you don't already have a robust sales enablement function, you are behind, and you need to catch up now. Start with talent. There are some great folks out there who'd like to share their experience, and more that you can find out, through LinkedIn and different groups. For me, you can contact me through sharon@salescraft.org. My book is called Salescraft. The LinkedIn group is called Salescraft. The Twitter feed is called Salescraft.
Great.
Excellent. So, yeah, I think we covered an awful lot of it. I think the overarching thing is like it's not a nice to have anymore, right? If you want your sales capacity to go up and you want to take full advantage of all the great hiring that you're doing, you have got to help these salespeople. You have got to enable them. You have got to help them. They're great at what they do. They just need the tools, and the world's changing so quickly that we have to make sure that we are feeding them appropriately, right? And I think that's just the thing for me is like, I like salespeople. I like what they do. They're out there every day. They're doing a great job of it, and empowering them to do really well is just a really it what makes me want to do my job, right? So I think having the operations is awesome, and that tells you why that you're growing the business, and it tells you how you're measuring, and then the enablement, and it shows you why you're positioning a company, the way you're positioning, and how you're pushing it out to the sales force. It's a must-have, right? So enjoy the time, and feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Great, thank you. And I will close us out here. My parting words are really focused on the training and the technology. I think gone are the days where someone can come in, train your team, entertain them, and then everything's all good, right? So this has to be kind of a longer-term play. And then in terms of technology, don't forget the gym membership, right? You're going to invest a lot of money, but think about what the plan is. Your sales enablement team can really be the ones who kind of help you define, kind of like a personal trainer does, define and walk you through the implementation of using those technologies to make a difference, a measurable difference with your sales organization. And I can be reached at dev@scaled.com. And thank you again to Sales Hacker for organizing, and to Velo for sponsoring, and thank you to our panelists, Sharon, Brian, and Tom. Thanks everyone for their time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.